Hello EDH enthusiasts, welcome back to another video, and in this video we're establishing a tier ranking for all of the red cards in the Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth. There are 6 tiers, and all of these tiers take into account limited, modern, and commander play. These are also my opinions, and cards can be moved around based on flavor and just my pure opinion. Before we get started, I'd like to announce that I will be part of this early access event on June 15th and 16th. I will be releasing 4 or 5 videos throughout that time about cards from Lord of the Rings Tales of Middle-earth, and I'll be doing arena gameplay. If you want to see any particular deck, comment it below and I'll see what I can do. Alright, moving back into tier rankings, red is a pretty powerful color and there are no cards in the F tier. Moving on to the D tier. First card in the D tier is Goblin Fire Leaper. This is a 2-mana 1/1 which already makes it bad, and it has the worst version of Fire Breathing. It does have the upside of when it dies dealing damage equal to its power, but it's still pretty bad. And the only other red card in the D tier is Goblin Assailant. This is a 2-mana 2/2 with no extra abilities, so it's not as good as many other cards, but there are some Goblin synergies, so it's alright. Moving into the C tier, we have Fear Fire Foes. This can be adjusted to exactly kill whatever creature you need, and if you're playing against tokens, it can also act like a board wipe. However, the 1 damage often won't be enough to kill stuff. Next up is Foray of Orcs. This is a 4-mana 2/2 that deals 2 damage to an opponent. But if you already have an army, it can deal much more than 2 damage and will be much bigger than a 2/2. This has a super high ceiling, but a pretty low floor. And our third and final C tier card is Swarming of Moria. This is essentially a 2-mana 2/2, but if you have a bigger army, then it will be a bigger creature. Our first red card in the B tier is Display of Power. This is insanely powerful, but at 3 mana, I don't see it being very good in Modern or in Limited. But in Commander, this is insane. You'll be able to copy tons and tons of spells with this. Next up is Eomer, Marshal of Rohan. This is a 4-mana 4/4 with haste, and whenever stuff dies, you get to untap and have extra combats. This is very powerful, but if your stuff doesn't die, you don't get the extra combat. And if your stuff stays alive and you hit for a small amount of damage, it's just not worth it. Our third B tier card is Fall of Kaer Andros. This is a 3-mana enchantment that allows us to amass orcs a lot if we're dealing excess non-combat damage. The only reason this isn't higher is because it's non-combat damage. If this could be combat damage as well, this would be insanely powerful. Next up is another burn spell enchantment. The Fiery Inscription is a 3-mana enchantment that lets the ring tempt you, and then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 2 damage to your opponent. This is pretty powerful, but at 3 mana, you've already cast several of your best burn spells, so I think it's too slow. Our next B tier card, and also the first character card on this list, is Glowin Dwarf Emissary. This is a 3-mana 3/3 that gets us a lot of treasures if we're casting historic spells, and allows us to sack a treasure to go to creature. The first ability on this card is pretty good, while the second one's not great, so that's why this is in the B tier. Another character in B tier is Grishnak Brash Instigator. This is a 3-mana 3/3 that gets you control of something. At base, it's just a 3-mana 3/3, but its ceiling is a lot higher than that. Another B tier red enchantment is Rising of the Day. 3 mana to give all your creatures haste is good, but legendary creatures being the only ones that get the +1/+0 drops this from A or S tier down to B tier. Next up in B tier is Warbeast of Gorgoroth. This is a 5-mana 5/4, and whenever a creature you control with power 4 or greater dies, you amass orcs 2. This seems like more of a green effect than a red effect, and this being in red makes it quite a bit weaker. That's why it's in the B tier. And yet another burn enchantment is in the B tier. There's a lot of red enchantments in this set, and they're just not that great, all of them. Fires of Mount Doom is 3 mana to deal 2 damage to something and remove all the equipment. If your opponent's playing good equipment, this could be very good. And then it has a mediocre ability to let you cast spells from exile and deal extra damage. Jumping right into the A tier, we have Battle Scared Goblin. This is a 2-mana 2/2 that essentially has 3 power when it's being blocked. This is very powerful, and especially if your opponents have to double block it with tokens or something, you can take them all out. This is very powerful for a common. Also in the A tier is Breaking the Fellowship. This 2-mana sorcery punishes our opponents for playing big creatures by using them against themselves. This is exactly what you want to do as a red player. Try to get your opponents to waste their big creatures on destroying their own creatures. The third red card in the A tier is Cast into the Fire. The first mode is pretty mediocre, doing 2 damage for 2 mana, but the second ability, Exiling an Artifact, can get rid of even indestructible artifacts. Continuing in the A tier, we have the second mono red Eomer. This is a 5 mana 5/4 with haste, so very powerful already, and if we go big, we also get to go wide. This is a great commander in my opinion. Tell me if you want me to build around it in the comments below. Also in the A tier is Fire of Orthanc. This is a 4 mana card that can destroy an artifact or a land. Destroying lands is brutal, and on top of destroying their artifact or land, creatures without flying can't block. So if you're swarming your opponents and they don't have any flyers, you can just absolutely wipe out their blocking ability. Next up is Gimli Counter of Kills. This 4 mana 4/3 with Trample is just so flavorful, and that's why I put it in the A tier. I love the scene when Gimli and Legolas are competing to see who can take out the most orcs. The next card in the A tier is Red's big boy, Oliphant. This is a 6 mana 6/4 with Trample, and whenever it attacks, another creature gets +2/+0, so it's essentially an 8/4. And with Mountain Cycling 1, it's even good in like limited when you're still early game. Another A tier card is also a big chunk, Oleg High Crusher. This 4 mana 4/4 with Trample can't block unless you control a goblin or an orc, but most red players don't block anyway, so that's hardly a downside. Next up in A tier is Smite the Deathless. This 2 mana for 3 damage thing is nothing we haven't seen before, except for the creature losing indestructible and exiling it. At that point, exiling it is just adding insult to injury. And the final red card in the A tier is Assault on Osgiliath. This doesn't seem great at first, making you pay 4 mana for a 1/1, but then everything gets double strike and haste. This is insanely powerful if you have a lot of small goblins, or even just one big orc army. Starting off our S tier, we have Book of Mazerbool. This is a 3 mana saga that gets you a 1/1, then a 2/2, or increases the power of your 1/1, and then increases the power of your 2/2 or your 3/3 or whatever you have, and it gains Menace. Menace is an underrated ability, so that's why this is S tier. Another S tier red card is Erkenbrand, Lord of Westfold. This is a 4 mana 3/3, but whenever a human enters the battlefield under your control, creatures you control get +1/+0 until end of turn. It's pretty easy to get a lot of humans onto the battlefield in a single turn, especially in like a red-white human strategy, so this will likely pump your creatures a lot. The next S tier red card is Gimli's Axe. This is 3 mana equipment that has Equip 2, and equipped creature gets +3/+0, and as long as it's legendary, it gets Menace. +3/+0 and Menace is insanely good during combat. 2 mana for +3/+2 and Trample makes Gimli's Fury one of the best combat tricks or pump spells in the entire game. Hew the Entwood is the next S tier card we have on this list. This just seems like such a red thing to do. Sacrifice all of your lands and just hope you get enough lands off the top or a powerful enough artifact to make it worth it. Next up is Moria Marauder. This is a 2 mana 1/1 with Double Strike that also gets you card advantage whenever goblins deal combat damage to a player. This is perfect for any goblin tribal or orc tribal deck. We also have Rally at the Hornburg. This 2 mana for 2 tokens also gives those tokens haste, so this might be the best 2 mana for 2 tokens cards Wizards of the Coast has ever printed. Next up is Ranger's Firebrand. This is just a better shock but at sorcery speed. The ring tempting you on top of the 2 damage is very powerful. Also in the S tier is Spiteful Banditry. This is just the new and improved non-legendary Meat Hook Massacre. This card was banned for a reason, but as Meat Hook Massacre of course, and now we got a whole new version to deal with. And finally, the most powerful red card in this set is There and Back Again. 5 mana for this insane saga is way undercosted. Smog alone would have to be like 7 mana. To get 14 treasures when it dies, this has so much combo potential and infinite mana potential and so many things that this card should not have been printed, but I'm happy it was. And this is your friendly reminder to expand the sphere by clicking that subscribe button and proliferating those like counters.